Good evening, everyone. We'll call the Lebanon Public Building Corporation special meeting, August 6, 2018. Roll call. President, I'm here. Vice President?
Matt Drury.
And Secretary?
Neil Taylor.
Okay. Do I have approval of the minutes of the last meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the meetings from the last
I'll second that.
minutes from the last meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, new business. First item on the agenda is the resolution 2018-01, Gateway Marketplace Project, consideration by the Board of Directors, approving of the Economic Development Agreement. I'll turn this over to our attorney.
Yep, Mr. President and Board, Ben Bontrager was going to give a little bit more of a background information with Project Gateway, and then I can get into more specifically Resolution 2018-1.
Good evening, board members. Ben Bontrager, Director of Planning for the City. We've been working on the Lebanon Gateway Marketplace project now for probably about 6 to 8 months. We're starting to reach the culmination of the planning process in terms of approvals, and we're working on a little bit of the financial aspects of the project. So I'll just give you a brief overview of the project itself. It's about a 24-acre site right at the southeast corner of State Road 32 and Interstate 65. You probably well know it as a former industrial site right there at the corner. There's 2 large industrial buildings there and then acreage back behind. There is a developer out of Indianapolis that has put together plans for a multi-site retail development, commercial retail development. It's anchored by a 40 to 100,000 square foot medical office building. There is a site for a 5-story hotel. They're working through a couple of developers to see if they can get that done. And then a series of 5 outlots that would be able to house things like family sit-down restaurants, which this community has indicated as a definite need, as well as other uses of the like. This project overall represents an investment of well over $20 million. We're anticipating the assessed value of the project upon completion to be somewhere in the $17 to $18 million range. So this is a significant property tax generator for the city. The challenge is there's also a significant cost of entry to this site. As you know, there are 2 large industrial buildings that currently sit on the site that have a significant cost to demolish and prep the site for development like this, as well as the fact that there's no internal utilities or infrastructure present on the site. That also represents a fairly significant cost. In discussions with the developer, in order to make this site marketable for his typical client, there was a need for city support for the project in the form of both right-of-way clearing and infrastructure improvements. So working through with the developer, we determined that there was roughly $2.5 million worth of infrastructure improvements that were necessary to the site. And so I'll let Mr. Shine go through the actual structure of the bond itself that is in terms of how the role that this board plays. But we will be using the property tax increment generated by the project in order to pay back the debt service on the bond for the $2.5 million infrastructure that are necessary. Right now, based on the projected assessed value, which again, those are projections based on our best estimates, we are anticipating that the property tax increment will cover the debt service on the bond. If for some reason it does not, then we have also offered up some additional backing in the form of food and beverage tax and then general property taxes. So we don't anticipate needing those, but if necessary, if something changes or something about the project changes, there are backups to make sure that the debt service can be paid. So right now, this is a situation where as I'm looking at these, it's a but-for sort of situation. But for the city's support, this project may or will not happen. And that's the situation we're in here. In order, the cost of entry is so high on this site that it made necessary for the city to come alongside the developer to make it a marketable site for him and make it feasible for his clients. So that's a real quick overview in terms of timing. We would expect, all things go well over the next several months, that the site clearing will likely start by September-ish, maybe October-ish time frame, and some additional site work will happen throughout the winter as possible, and then we'll start working on some of the infrastructure and the building pads next spring to start delivering those building pads for potential tenants by summer, ideally. So I'd be happy to answer any general property or project questions you might have, or I'll turn it over to Mr. Shine to fill in some of the gaps.
Do you guys have any questions?
so.
Thanks, Ben and Mr. President and Building Corporation. So what you've seen and what changed a little bit through some versions, I'll just point out a couple of the highlights, but is an economic development agreement, as Mr. Bontrager indicated, and this is what we're seeking for approval tonight, again, subject to final approval of the City Council, the Economic Development Corporation, and the Redevelopment Commission. And so this Economic Development Agreement is an agreement between the City of Lebanon, the Redevelopment Commission, the Lebanon Economic Development Commission, this building corporation, and then the developer, which is, its name is Lebanon Gateway Properties, LLC. And so, as Mr. Bontrager indicated, Exhibit A in this Economic Development Agreement has a description, legal description of the project site. Exhibit B talks about the project, and then Exhibit C will describe some of the public improvements that are going to be engaged through the funding source of this type of project. As has been already done, this Redevelopment Commission has taken steps to create a consolidated economic development area, which this project is situated in. Essentially, this building corporation is going to act as a conduit in this transaction with the Lebanon Redevelopment Commission, entering into a lease agreement, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And then the fund from the allocation area using tax increment financing is going to be used to pay the lease rental payments. And then there's going to be some additional backup in the financing side of things. And again, all of it's subject to council approval. So this is just one step in many that are outlined here. But the project proceeds, the city, his staff has been in discussion back and forth with the developer, is essentially about $2.5 million, as Mr. Bontrager indicated, for project proceeds that are going to be used for these public improvements that are located in Exhibit C to this project agreement. Again, the leasing public improvements, it's going to be entered into with the Building Corporation and the Redevelopment Commission, acting as the lessee, and this term would not exceed 25 years. Essentially, if we look at Exhibit C, what these project proceeds are going to be used for, as they're all public improvements, and again, demolition of the site is going to be one of them. Road construction is going to be a part of it, and it's going to be include subgrade preparation, stabilization, drains, stone-based curbs, walks, ADA compliant ramps. All this is outlined again in Exhibit C. Water utility improvements, sanitary utility improvements, stormwater improvements, and grading, backfill, restoration, seeding. All that's outlined as eligible costs that'll be used for these public improvements of this project. So that's essentially the Economic Development Agreement. Again, this is, there are conditions in here that require the developer to adhere to, and it's all subject to financing. Okay, so that is a condition precedent to all this going forward. So the resolution 2018-01 is again a resolution where the City of Lebanon Redevelopment Commission, together with the City of Lebanon, Indiana, and the Economic Development Commission, as well as this Public Building Corporation, desire to foster economic development within the city. The Lebanon Gateway Properties, again the developer here, desires to invest approximately $17 million to develop and redevelop the property that's located at the southeast quadrant of I-65 and State Road 32 to support a proposed mixed-use development to serve the facilities. And all of that's defined in the Economic Development Agreement, which will be attached to this resolution as Exhibit A. The developers agreed to construct the facilities and fulfill its obligations that are set forth in the Economic Development Agreement. And the city agrees to provide economic development incentives in connection with the completion of the facilities. This resolution states that this building corporation believes that the facilities are in the best interest of the city and its citizens and desires to approve the Economic Development Agreement substantially similar to the Economic Development Agreement attached as Exhibit A. This development agreement is hereby approved subject to the final approval of the Common Council of the City, the Economic Development Commission, and the Redevelopment Commission. And then the president or any officer of the corporation is authorized to execute an economic development agreement substantially similar to this economic development agreement with such changes as such officer deems necessary or advisable upon advice of legal counsel. And this resolution shall be in full force and effect on its passage. So what we're looking for, again, is a motion to consider the approval of Resolution 2018-01.
Counselor, is there a cap on the expense? I know that used to be a printing company. Has there already been a phase 1, 2, or 3 on it?
I'll let a cap on the expense as it...
The cleanup, if it's discovered that there's printing toxins in the ground.
I know due diligence has begun, and Mr. Bontrager, you want to answer Mr. Kurulik as to what environmental due diligence has been
Sure.
done?
From what I understand, the environmental condition on the sites is fairly straightforward. There is some cleanup that will be necessary, but it's not substantial. Maybe to address your question, as far as cap, that $2.5 million number is not flexible. So
the city could be on the hook for a lot more if it's discovered that there's...
our cap is $2.5 million. So if his costs are $4 million, our cap is $2.5 million. So yeah, from what I understand, that there's not going to be a substantial cleanup associated with the site based on the phase 1, phase 2 results. But regardless, the city's financial responsibility of the project is capped at $2.5 million.
In the funding sources with any incentives provided by the city will all be specifically involving the public improvements. So any exposure as it relates to that will be on the developer. So, Mr. President, if there aren't any other questions, what's before us is Resolution 2018-01, so we're looking for a motion to consider that resolution.
Is there any other questions? I'll entertain a motion on 2018-1 resolution.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2018-01 Gateway Marketplace Project pending City Council and other necessary approvals.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any other question? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion's carried. The second item on the agenda is the Resolution 2018-2 Gateway Marketplace Project. Consideration by the Board of Directors approving a form of lease and other actions related thereto.
Yep. Yes, thanks. Thank you, Mr. President and Building Corporation. This is really just the second step as far as the financing, one of the financing mechanisms as we were talking about earlier. Again, Resolution 2018-02 is this building corporation would approve a form of a lease agreement that's related to this Gateway Marketplace project. It states that pursuant to Indiana statutes that This building corporation has purposes including the financing and leasing of buildings and other capital improvements of the city of Lebanon. That the city, the Lebanon Redevelopment Commission, the Lebanon Economic Development Commission, and this building corporation desire to foster economic development within the city. Again, the Lebanon Gateway Properties is the developer here, and it intends to invest approximately $17 million to develop and redevelop the property that we've been talking about. But again, is set forth at I-65 and State Road 32 at the southeast quadrant. On this day of August 6th, this corporation has approved and authorized the execution of an economic development agreement between the city, the Economic Development Commission, the Redevelopment Commission, this building corporation, and the developer, which again provides for the acquisition, construction, installation, and equipping of certain improvements that are necessary related to the project. In order to provide for the financing and construction of all or a portion of the cost of the project, this corporation desires to enter into a lease between this building corporation as the lessor and the Redevelopment Commission as the lessee with respect to the acquisition and leasing of certain real estate and the project to be constructed thereon. And that's going to be the lease premises. And as been described in some other meetings, it's similar to the way that this building that we're in was actually financed several years ago. The lease rental payments due under the lease and payable to the Redevelopment Corporation or Redevelopment Commission to the corporation, the lease rentals shall be assigned by this corporation to the city for the payment of principal and interest on certain economic development lease rental bonds that are going to be expected to be issued by the city pursuant to Indiana Code for the purpose of providing funds to finance all or a portion of the cost of the project. And those were set forth again in the economic development agreement that were defined as the public improvements, essentially again all the demolition and the road public improvements that are located at the project. The approval of the lease in the form presented to this board is approved, and the president or any other officer of the corporation is authorized and directed to execute and deliver this lease with any such changes that the lease as such officer deems necessary or advisable upon the advice of legal counsel in the name and on behalf of the corporation and the secretary or any officer of this corporation that is authorized and directed to attest to such execution is hereby ratified and approved. Again, the board accepts the ownership of the leased premises upon its transfer to this corporation from the developer, and any board is authorized and directed in the name and on behalf of the corporation to execute and deliver such documents, including a lease rental assignment between the corporation and the city for the purposes of assigning the lease rentals to the city, and to take such action as a member desires to be necessary and desirable. And again, all of this will be subject to City Council approval and the other boards, including the Redevelopment Commission and the Economic Development Commission.
Questions? Okay, I would entertain a motion to pass Resolution 2018-2, a lease with the approval of the lease and other actions related thereof to the Gateway Marketplace project. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the lease.
Is there a second?
Second.
Just to clarify, that's a motion to approve Resolution 2018-02?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Is there any other business that come before the board?
No other business that I'm aware of.
Is there any questions to the public? Anybody have any questions in the audience? Yes. Yeah.
Dick Robertson, Lebanon City Council. Just want to let you know the city council is really in favor of this project, okay? The only question that we do have a concern with, some of us have, is with the use of the backup of the food and beverage fund money in this process. The council has not approved any funds like that to be set aside for this kind of lease. I'm not saying they won't, I'm just saying at this present time, we haven't done that. We haven't had any discussion. Budget hearings are starting to come up. I'm sure we'll be talking about it at that time. So I'm just going to say I can't guarantee that will be used, but I'm sure we'll find something to help back that up. But do understand, I know all the council members are in favor of this project. Okay?
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. Okay, is there any no other business come before the board? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Motion carried. We are adjourned.
Before anybody leaves,
Yeah.